So, episode 5. This episode is very action heavy. This is peak aura farming Garou. This is Orochi's first battle in the series, Rover's first introduction, and this episode has to look good. This episode is extremely important narratively, so this is where the cope argument of CG staff saving their budget for the fights is really tested. This episode is maybe the second most important this entire season. It has to look excellent, and if it does not look good, then not much this season will look good at all. And for me personally, Garou vs Orochi is among my top 5 favorite fights in all of One Punch Man and maybe even top 3, so I've got a personal stake in this. That being said, this review will differ from the last ones. As I was watching the episode, I wrote down a bunch of notes, so I'll just be reading those notes for you and then giving my overall opinions at the end. And without any further ado, let's begin. It is really cool that there is no opening this episode. It immediately makes it feel like it's something special and a lot more eerie than usual. This is kind of what we got with the last episode of Season 1 as well, with the Boros battle where the opening was integrated into the fight itself, but here we just skip the opening and get to the action immediately. When Rover comes in, he looks pretty good, I'd say. I love the sounds though, the sound design for Rover is sick. However, this is where the episode runs into its first hurdle. There are some deleted scenes in the Garou vs 3 Demons fight. Specifically, the 3 Demons are supposed to jump Garou. We even see in the episode itself the piece of the broken wall that is supposed to be there from them jumping Garou, but that was deleted. And they also deleted their combination attack, which I also find kind of odd, but I guess they have to keep the pace very fast for this episode to make up for the slow pace of the previous ones. The action in this fight is also just really stiff and kind of looks bad, I am not gonna lie. And then we go to Rover vs Garou, which has a very rough start, I would say. There are some still frames and some very stiff action there. There are definitely some still shots on Rover vs Garou that do not look great, but Rover actually has some excellent movement animation for like one scene. The music placement is also a lot better this episode right off the bat, though there are still some awkward cuts, both music and visual-wise. And there is some very slow animation on Rover vs Garou too, specifically Garou's punch on Rover's head. And there is a really awkward cut right after the impact. There are a few good-looking shots in the fight, but overall, especially compared to the manga, it really is underwhelming. The backgrounds do look consistently great this episode though, and again, I really like the sound design. Then there's a really big increase in drawing quality the moment Garou drops down into Garou's lair. There are some still shots, but overall the dialogue scene is much better than the ones that we've gotten in previous episodes, at least I think so. And the music actually fits the scene this time, unlike in the Limiter episode. But as the conversation goes on, there are sudden dips and ups in quality. You can really tell where one animator stops and another begins. Garou's iconic pose with the iconic phrase "it's hunting time" does come off as a bit underwhelming. The color filter maybe didn't need to be there either, and it just doesn't really have that kind of impact that it did in the manga. Orochi's intro does look sick, but they skipped a couple shots that I was really hoping to see, plus there are a couple awkward cuts still. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty. Orochi vs Garou is the meat and potatoes of this episode. It has to be peak, so let's see how it goes. I like how they added the little squeezes that Orochi does to Garou where he begins coughing up blood. It makes the situation feel more desperate for the hero hunter, and the voice actor of him does a really good job selling the struggle. I love the moment of silence before Garou clenches his fists and the music kicks in, and they adapted one of my favorite shots of the entire manga extremely well. I love this scene of Orochi looking down on Garou where the two of them face off, and I do think the anime did capture that moment really well. Then I like that they added a reaction shot from Garou before Orochi goes on the attack. It gives it slightly more anticipation than the other fights so far this season. And this is where my praise takes a backseat because Orochi's horn attacks on Garou look really bad. And Garou deflecting them looks even worse. There's some PNGs in there, there's some really stiff action. I'm also really confused on the shot after where Garou gets up after getting pierced by the first horn. There is supposed to be a hole in his stomach, and the entire point of the shot is to show that wound, and they're talking about it, but the camera lingers just above where the wound is, so you can't actually see it. Maybe it's just anime censorship, I don't know, but it just feels kinda weird, especially for One Punch Man, where censorship hasn't really been much of a problem. And then Garou's running doesn't feel fast at all, even the posture is too uptight, there's no visual speed increase like in the manga, it just looks odd. Also, quick side note, Orochi has one of the most complicated designs I've ever seen in a manga. So a lot of people, myself included, kind of expected some shots of him to be CGI. But here it seems they're going fully 2D, and in some shots he does look great. But then in others he looks really off, very little detail. And yeah, he was never going to be as detailed as the manga for sure, but it still looks kind of bad. You could have still added a little bit of detail, it didn't need to be a completely bland outline, you know? Also, I'm not sure why they added the black and white filter on T-Rex Orochi, it feels kind of unnecessary, though I will say the shots themselves do look sick. They've got a little bit of movement, but overall they are kind of PNGs again, which isn't really the best. The fire-breathing scenes with Orochi do look dope, I like the fire effects, and the impact they have is pretty good, but they're still shots. The sound effects are dope, the music also goes hard as fuck, but, I mean, they're still shots. Like, you go to this one fan animation on YouTube, it is much better, honestly, than the fight has been so far. Orochi's punch is kind of stilted and awkward, but I will admit I am a victim of finding it extremely cathartic to finally see this fight animated, even if it's not animated the best, or even good at certain parts. Fun little manga fact, there was supposed to be a smiling face on the rubble when Garou gets up after the punch, like his face ingrained a smiley face in there. Kind of odd that they excluded it, especially considering some of the earlier Easter eggs that they added, but it's not really a big deal. And the next few shots of Orochi just do not look good. When Garou says Orochi isn't scary, unlike in the manga, I can feel where he's coming from. In the manga, he's terrifying, but here, yeah, I'm not sure I'd be that scared either. The color filters are starting to get kind of obnoxious. They put it on like every iconic shot. And why do they go with the blue here when Garou hits his pose? There's fire blazing all around them. Why not make it some kind of dynamic orange, red, yellow lighting, you know? Make it seem like they're in hell, you know, just like the Von Fan animation does. But they didn't. The shot of Orochi hitting Garou's pose does not look good, man. And the next couple shots, while not bad, are not the best either. Overall, the fights weren't awful. There are some good moments, but there's also some really bad shots too. The cope argument of they're saving their budget pretty much amounts to this. This is likely the best the fights will look, as again, this is a pivotal episode. Introduces Garou and Orochi, and has massive implications for Garou. This is where the budget should have gone, and where it did go, I presume, and this is the result we see. There were still some awkward cuts and still shots, but the soundtrack does go really hard, and we did get to see fights this episode at last. This was unsurprisingly the most animated episode of the season so far, and the best by far, but honestly, given what it had to live up to, would I call it a disappointment? No, because my expectations were low enough to not be disappointed. Was I pleasantly surprised? Kind of, I guess. It's better than I expected at this point, though I will again state my expectations were low. They always have been for this season ever since the teasers after the first one started dropping. My first episode review came off really positive due to the novelty of seeing these events finally on screen, and on one Orochi related thing that you'll be aware of if you're a longtime manga fan. But overall, my hopes were always kind of low, so hey, I can say this episode kind of lived up to them, I guess. I'd give it... it's really hard to place a number on it, but maybe a 6.5? I don't know. I don't think it's awful, as I'm sure a lot of people will say. It is certainly by miles the best episode of the season, but it's not great, and I would kind of hesitate to call it good either. Like, it had a ton to live up to, don't get me wrong, like, I do know that they never had a chance to make it look as good as the manga, cause Murata, but, you know, I still would have very much liked it to be better than what it ended up being, much, much better. One Punch Man obviously deserves much, much better, but this is what we're getting, so still not the best. And yeah, that's probably it for my review. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. And with nothing else to say, I wish you a great rest of your day. Goodbye.